Before we get started, I just want to mention that we'll be doing a 4-week series on addiction. But I want to clarify, because a lot of people say, well, I'm not an addict. When I talk about addiction, I'm going to be talking about a lot of different types of addiction. And I think all of us will fit in some category, especially starting today with the root of addiction, which is codependency. So we'll go through this whole process and show you how it works. Okay? And I'll tell you the story about how this came about too. I'll tell you in a minute. All right, I'm going to start off by doing a reading from the language of letting go. And one of my very favorite readings, I figured I'd share it. It comes from the big book of AA. It's pretty neat. Okay. This prayer is based on a section of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Thank you for keeping me straight yesterday. Please help me stay straight today. For the next 24 hours, I pray for knowledge of your will for me only and the power to carry that through. Please free my thinking of self-will, self-seeking, dishonesty, and wrong motives. Send me the right thought, word, or action. Show me what my next step should be. In times of doubt or indecision, please send your inspiration and guidance. I ask you might help me work through all my problems to your glory and honor. This prayer is a recovery prayer. It can take us through any situation. In the days ahead, we'll explore the ideas of it. And if we pray this prayer, we can trust it has been answered with a yes. Today, I will trust that God will do it for me what I cannot do for myself. I'll do my part, working the steps and letting God do the rest. I always love that prayer because of the concept of let go and let God, because I'm learning over and over again. We'll talk a lot about that today in the lecture about I call the two big dangers of life, fear and control. And I think everything we talk about connected with this is about that. I want to just kind of share a little bit about how this series came about and how this whole concept of my codependency series came about. As most of you who know me, I spent a good portion of my life in 12-step programs, but not in 12-step programs. I spent a good portion of my life trying to fix and save everybody. And so as a result, I basically never did my own work. And I realized I learned something from a powerful little reading that I got from one of my eating disorder books called, the concept of the Iceberg Theory. And this is something that opened my heart, my eyes, and had me put a lot of this together. So I attended some ACOA meetings, looked at the principles of ACA, and then I basically was able to put together my series on codependency and this addiction series. Everything I'm talking about today is a reflection of things I experienced in my own life, because I realize now that addiction was only the cover for everything else that was going on inside of me. And basically, for the first 44 years of my life, internally, I was an iceberg. That's why I love the Iceberg Theory. The concept is I was frozen. I never really thought out. I got in touch with myself till I began to really do my own work. And we'll talk a lot about that as we go through the series. I'll show you how it works, okay? I want to start off today by talking about what I call the root of addiction, which is codependency. And codependency is something, I'll define it for you so you get an idea what it's really all about. The simple definition of codependency is any person, place, or thing that I have built a dependency on, which means I cannot function without it, that makes my life unmanageable or makes my life crazy. That can be a substance, that can be a person, that can be a work situation, that can be a family member, that can be neighborhood, it can be a lot of different things. The key is dependency and unmanageability. And so many of us will be able to identify with these different areas of codependency because these are ways in which they've all touched all of us at one time or another. But put up with me just for a couple of minutes. I'm going to give you a little bit of theory. Then I'll talk about reality. Okay, dot you on mine, right? I'll talk about reality in a couple of minutes. But basically, if you take Philosophy 101, there's actually a diagram of how life is supposed to be. Now, I mean, the diagram is kind of interesting, but it says that the first 10 years of your life are referred to as the foundation years. Now, I'm generous, I say 10. In philosophy, they say 7. But the first 10 years of your life are your foundation years. All the basics of life are put together in you by the time you're 10 years old. You know, it's amazing. I could actually sit down with anybody and go through their history, and I can tell them everything about them just from the first 10 years of their life. Because there are traits and characteristics, they come from our systems. The second phase of life is supposed to be from 11 to about 14. We call that the state of confusion, which means we have no idea who we are. Our hormones, everything else is changing, life is changing, and we get very confused. From 14 to about 19 or 20 is referred to as the war zone. It's my nickname for it. Teenage years. It's almost like during those years, you're supposed to engage in a war with your family systems. It's like you're breaking away for your battle for independence. Then you're supposed to become a totally independent person between the ages of 20 and 26. Nobody ever told me that, but that's all right. And then from 26 to 120, it's called adulthood. Well, I find this really interesting. The process is true, but the ages are not true. We all go through our stages at different times in our life. I know I went through my adolescence in my late 30s and my early 40s. So many people go through things at different stages of their life. And so we have to look at this from this perspective. We come down to it today. As little children, when you're born and you come into this world, whether you realize it or not, you actually join 5 families. Whether you want to join or not, you're a little baby. You join your blood family. That can even be an extended family. You also join your neighborhood, your cultural or your environment family. You join a religious family system. I'm sure when I was 1 month old, I'd jump up and down in my crib and say, please baptize me Catholic. My parents put me into their belief system, which really wasn't mine, but it became my normal. As a result, then, basically, you also enter into a peer family. And children are tough on kids. And finally, a society family. And these family systems are supposed to give us what I call our basic fundamental needs for life. Those needs are very simple. As a child growing up, I have a need to feel safe. Safety is the most important thing for a child in growing up, to be around people that keep me safe. I need unconditional love, to be accepted and to be loved unconditionally. I need the basics of life, food, shelter, clothing, to be taken care of. I also need to be able to interact with other human beings. So they need to teach me what I call basic life skills, how to play, how to socialize, how to interact with other human beings. And finally, we have a need for family, a place to belong to. We're not islands. You're not going to do any growing unless you grow in conjunction, and we search for a family system. Now, many of us in growing up didn't receive these things. So if these things are not really met when you're a child, then you'll search for them for the rest of your life. And so many times what happens is you have a tendency to migrate into what I call codependent behavior patterns. Now, to keep them simple, I divide them into 3 categories. We either become isolators or fantasizers, and many of us win the jackpot and become caretakers. But there are 3 basic areas. They're called survivor skills. We would identify them now as codependent behaviors. You see, I don't really know who I am. I have no sense of myself as a person. So what do? I migrate towards different behavior patterns. For example, many of us migrate towards isolation. These are little children that grow up in homes that are empty, cold. These are kids that never get any love. These are the kids that are starving for love. They're starving to belong somewhere. They have no real identity. Many times we refer to them as the lost children. They have no sense of where they belong. And so when they grow up, they migrate towards the following addictions. One addiction we don't talk about, it's been around for a long time, and it's in conjunction now with another addiction. It's called institutional addiction or technology addiction. It's amazing today because basically, if I'm empty, lonely, scared, and afraid, I find me a therapist, and isolators are good at taking people hostage. So what do? I take the therapist hostage, and if I really get upset, they put me into an institution. I get 3 meals a day, the warm fuzzies, and free trips to the ballpark. Well, God, my family never did that. I like it there. So I become institutionalized after a while. So I go from one to another based on what I can do. It becomes a way of life. Today we have technology addiction. Our whole life is being centralized around this little machine. Many of us can't function without it. We built a very dependency on it. And sometimes it can make our life very unmanageable. I mean, today we don't have to think anymore. If you have a question, what do? You call Mrs. Google. She answers all your questions. I have no idea how she knows all this stuff. It's sad because she put the encyclopedia salesman out of business. It's totally amazing. But it's interesting. In my bookcase back here, I still have a set of encyclopedias, but now they're called collector's items. From way back. They actually belong to my wife's mother, and I put them in here just to hold on to them. They're really old, so they've been around for a long time. But today we don't need that because we have Mrs. Google. Someday I'd like to meet Mrs. Google. That's what I call her. But the bottom line is we get our answers met so quickly, it's unbelievable. What's so scary about it is it's a dependency. We don't think anymore. We don't have to think. Pretty soon, I'm just going to tell Mrs. Google to give the lecture. That'll take care of that. That'd be fun. But the concept, if she does, though, because under Vince's corner on our technology, all these lectures are there. It's amazing after a while how this stuff works. I mean, it can be a good thing. It can be a bad thing. The secret is we have to learn not to isolate. We have to learn. And this concept of technology can take us away from interaction. It's a place to hide a lot of times. I can hide in it. Other addictions that come under isolation are drugs and alcohol. These are what I call the secret addicts, people that do all their drinking, their drugging behind closed doors in secret, and nobody knows they really have a problem. They function. We refer to them as functional addicts. They show up for work every day, but they have another life, things they do. It's totally amazing. The other addiction that comes under this are relationship addictions. I'm empty, I'm lonely, I'm scared. I'm lonely. The first person that comes along that treats me nice, I'm taking the sucker home. Even if they don't want to go, I'll take them anyway. We have an old saying, you heard this about 1,000 times. If you truly love someone, let them go. They're supposed to come back, they'll come back. Codependents and addicts don't believe that. Their mantra is, if you truly love someone, follow them and stalk them. If they try to get away, kill them. We're crazy. We get so addicted and so crazy. And relationships can be a powerful addiction because you're dealing with the emotional system. I can hide in a relationship. I can hide someplace in that. Just like work, I can hide in work. I can do the exact same thing every day till 4 days after I'm dead. I still show up even after I'm dead. I don't know. The bottom line is it's my way of life. My identity comes from what I do, not from who I am. I'll go through all these addictions with you and show you how they work and how they're connected as I go deeper into this series. just highlighting them today. The other addiction that comes under isolation, very many times we don't talk about it too much. It's a powerful addiction called anorexia. It's a power. 80% of all anorexics, by the way, are usually female and come out of homes and backgrounds where they have major father issues. And anorexia is scary because you literally shut the body down, so somebody's always got to take care of you all the time. And as a result, then it's a disease we don't talk about a lot, but it's a powerful disease. It affects a lot of people. And it's a powerful disease because what it means is you have no good image of yourself. And as a result, you have this body image issues too. It's really scary when you come right down to it. The second area is called fantasy addicts. I refer to them as shame-based addicts. These are individuals who grow up in homes and environments that are extremely traumatic, homes and environments where there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of drug addiction, alcoholism, a lot of mental health issues. These are the kids that don't want to take anybody home. They're embarrassed by their family. So what they do at a very early age, you learn something called disassociation. They literally create a fantasy family because they can't handle what's really going on. And what happens when shame is so powerful and trauma is so powerful, we disassociate and create almost like a fantasy world to live in, to avoid having to face the reality of what I have to face every day. And it's scary because after a while, we believe the fantasy. That's why I think people have a hard time understanding this phase of addiction, because a lot of times I get caught up in it because I'm avoiding like crazy, dealing with any type of reality at all. Under this comes drug addicts and alcoholics. These are the unmanageable addicts, the addicts whose lives are out of control. Their life is crazy, but if you confront them and you actually try to confront them about their addiction, they'll say to you, "Not me," and they'll put it right back on you. See, the thing is, I can easily blame you. So you're the reason why I drink. But I don't really have an addiction, even though I do. You can present all kinds of stuff to them. The denial pattern, but they're not really denying. They go into disassociation. I'll give you an example, and it's the one I always give, but when I was running the halfway house in South Philadelphia, and one day, it was a nice summer day, I walked outside of my house, I was still a priest then, and I passed the bar on the corner, Porgy's Bar. The bar doors were open. One of the guys from my halfway house was sitting in the bar having a shot and beer. I didn't say a word to him. I just walked past the door. I saw him, he saw me. I kept walking. He came running out of the bar, screaming down the street, "Father, I'm not drinking." And then when I turned around and looked at him, he still had the shot glass in his hand. He stuck the shot glass in his pocket. Now, how many normal drinkers run out of bars and scream and yell they're not drinking when they're drinking? But see, what happened to him was when he saw me, shame kicked in. And the shame had him go into that alternative world. He couldn't handle the world of reality. We see this today in very many ways in narcissistic behavior, in people that really have some severe trauma, severe things going on inside, and they have a very difficult time living in any type of reality at all, or facing any type of reality. So what do? They live in this alternative world, this fantasy world. And here's the thing you have to try to understand. When they're in that world, they believe it's true. Even though we can look at them and say, "No, you're lying." They say, "No, they're not lying." They actually believe it. It's their survival piece. That's why fantasy addictions are pretty powerful and also tough to deal with. And I'll spend a lot of time talking to you about these addictions. The other ones that come under this are sex addiction, very powerful addiction. Again, did a lot of disassociation, living two different lifestyles. When I was a priest, I lived in a rectory with a priest who was a pedophile. And I had no idea at all. He was the head of the youth programs. He was in charge of the CYO. I lived with him for 6 years. And I didn't find out anything about this until later on. He got in hot water and ended up, he's in prison right now. But it's scary. But see, the scary thing about it is, it's like living two different lives. When you're in one, the other one doesn't exist. And on the other side, the other one does exist. It's very hard to really try to comprehend this and understand it, because we can become very judgmental. But it's a very powerful disease. Again, as I said, I'll get into that a lot more later on. The other one is gambling. And gambling is a powerful fantasy addiction. And today especially, it's very powerful because, God, we can sit home and there goes that phone again. We can gamble all day long right here in your pajamas. It's totally amazing. You come right down to it. It's really scary. And so the concept is, it's something that takes over you. It's a very powerful disease and a very tough one to work with. All these fantasy addictions are tough to work with. The other one is workaholism, working at jobs that are doomed for failure. And yet you spend a lot of time blaming other people. See, when I can't handle a situation, I go into the blame mode. I can blame somebody else. I spent a good portion of my life blaming the church, blaming institutions, blaming everybody. And my mother, my father, the whole world is to blame. The bottom line was, I don't want to look at me and deal with me. So I was scared. See, fear does this to you. Shame does it to you. It buries you. One of my favorite people, John Bradshaw, wrote a book called Healing the Shame That Binds You. A very powerful book, because shame can do such a number on you. It's unbelievable when you come right down to it. The other addiction that comes onto this is bulimia. This is part of eating disorders. But bulimics are people that appear to be perfect, but they do different forms of binging and purging and stuff to that effect. It's all done in secret. It's like two different worlds. And usually, again, it's a lot of issues that go back to the first 10 years of your life when you come right down to it. The last area, and this one I can talk about till midnight if you want to stick around, it's called caretaking. Oh, God. These are the goody two-shoes kids, the nice guys and gals. Kids that grow up, but don't really grow up. These are kids that are given a lot of responsibility at a very early age. They're literally told what they're going to be, how they're going to be it. And as a result, they have to live up to everybody's expectations. I lived this in my own life because my mother put me in a seminary and I had to live up to the expectations of what they wanted me to be, even though I didn't want to be there. Scary. And yet, caretakers are good, but they don't realize it. They're very, 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 very angry people. It's a lot of repressed anger. And so the big thing with caretakers is they're very much into control. Very much into trying to fix people. Parents do to their kids a lot of times. I want them to be what I want them to be. This is what'll be good for you. I get all these phone calls constantly about this. The other thing that goes on to caretaking, the caretaker, drug addict, and alcoholic. These are what I call the legal addicts. They go to the legal pushers. They're called doctors. They get their prescriptions. They can very easily fall into a trap with all this stuff. It's totally amazing. I'll give you a good example of this. When I got my carpal tunnel surgery, at the end of the surgery, the doctor gave me a script for 90 Percocet. I told him I don't take any of that. He says, I don't care what you do with the script, I have to give it to you so the insurance will pay me. So I just tore it up and threw it in the trash can. He just did what he was supposed to do. And it's scary. What do I need that for? The bottom line is, very many times there's this connection back to companies and things to this effect, and we can so very easily fall into these forms of addiction. And yet, they're called illegal addictions. Cigarettes come under that. A lot of things come under that. You can fall into a lot of traps in a lot of different areas. They're not good for our health. You come right down to it. But caretakers, they're always on edge. That's why they get into smoking and stuff to that effect, because they're constantly nervous. They're on edge all the time. They're always performing. They got to be in charge of everything all the time. That's when it comes to work. These are the caretakers. They're unbelievable. My God. I always say this, I'll share it with you. If you want to make a lot of money, now you really want to make a lot of money, okay? So all you got to do is start your own business. And then after you start your own business, if you need 15 workers to run your business, hire 3 caretakers. 3. But most caretakers do the work of 5 people. You must give them total control of your whole entire company. Don't even bother showing up. They'll be there every day. They never take a day off. They'll stay after hours and work. They'll do everything for you. The company will become theirs, even though it's not theirs. All you gotta do is stop in on Friday, pick up the money. But there's rules with caretakers. Don't pay them too much. They get upset. They really get upset. Right, Loretta? They really get upset. And that's a big part of it. And basically they're constantly doing the extra hours, all kinds of stuff. And just don't pay them too much, because that bothers them a lot. I'm talking about myself, So I know what I went through with all this. I'll talk more about this when I get into the details of all this stuff later on. But it's just amazing what caretakers can do. And they can't take a day off, because a company won't function if they take a day off. Good God. Don't ever live with a caretaker if they're going to call out sick when they're not sick. It's an adventure. Go get a hotel room, because they're going to drive you crazy all night. Because they have to make up a story to tell everybody the next day, and nobody wants to hear the story anyway. But then you got to make it up, and then when nobody wants to hear it, they're going to go tell it anyway. So it's not going to make a difference, because they feel guilty and they feel like there's something. There's that control that's there all the time. That's where the anger comes into play. Anger is such a powerful control mechanism. You can use it that way. And that's why caretakers, when it comes to relationships, they love to get involved in relationships with sickies. The sicker, the better. Bring me your sick and you're deprived, and I will take care of them. There's rules, though. Don't you dare get better, because I'm going to bitch about you, gripe about you, complain about you all day long. I need somebody to complain about. What can I tell you? It's a control mechanism. I always tell the funny story. I used to go visit my aunt over in Pensacola, she in a wheelchair. And I make probably once a month, I try to stop in and visit and spend some time with her, have a cup of coffee. But basically, every time I got there, her next door neighbor, this Italian lady, would come over. She saw me coming. And she'd sit there at the table and tell me all about her husband, the bum. Been living with this bum for 48 years. He's a bum. He does nothing. I do everything. So she lists all the things she did. And I made the biggest mistake one day to say to her, well, why do you stay with him? She would rip my head off. Because I love him? Well, God, I'll tell you a secret. That man better never try to do anything. She'll kill him. See, she's running the show. She's in charge. Because it's a control issue. Anger goes along with control. Remember that. So the concept is, it's like, I'm going to be the one to run your life for you. Whenever you find yourself trying to run somebody else's life, you're in trouble. Detachment, all that process is so important in the process of it. Even though we can give advice, we can't do it, because each person is an individual. That's a sad thing sometimes too, but it's true. So the concept is, many of you have raised children. You know what I'm talking about. You love to see them go in this direction, and they go here. It's amazing, isn't it? You want to go grab them by the back of the head and pull them back, but they can't do that. They got to make their mistakes and go through their changes too. Letting go is a hard thing for caretakers. The other thing that comes under caretakers, is the whole concept of compulsive overeating when it comes to addiction. So you have to realize that most compulsive overeaters are people that have a tremendous amount of anger. So you're looking at my major disease. I have an eating disorder. That's where I did all my work. I still go to 3 meetings a week. I love my program. But the concept is, I realize now, for such a long period of time, I had so much garbage and so much anger inside of me. And that's what compulsive overeaters do. We surround ourselves with a lot of weight. It's called a lot of insulation. So nobody can get too close to me. They have major issues with sexuality and major issues with a lot of things. A lot of it's based on body image and stuff, but it's a safety place to be too. So anger can do so many powerful things now. So when I get into caretaking, I'll talk to you about that. Because what I want to do in this series, I'm going to spend the whole entire week, next week, talking about isolation addictions, take you through each one of them, and show you how the recovery process works for them also. Because the thing I want to try to get across to you is that addiction is only a cover. One of the most powerful things I always talk about is what I call the Iceberg Theory. I know it's hard to see in here, but the Iceberg Theory is that these are all the addictions at the top here. They're just covering all the stuff that's deep inside of us that we're afraid to look at and deal with. And it's a powerful process. And this is something that opened my heart and opened my mind so many times in my life, because I realize now, I didn't realize how many buried feelings I had. And it took me a long time to finally melt that iceberg. And I'm still melting it today. I'm doing my steps all over again now. I'm going through them again, because I really need to continue to melt that iceberg, which is really important. And I never realized I even was an iceberg. That's what denial does to you when you're in all these crazy things. And so what I wanted to talk to you about the root, the foundation. And I share this because unless you go to what's underneath and work on it, then many of us will play a game called, hopping addictions, jumping from one addiction to another. Addicts very many times have a tendency, especially in rehabs, to put on 50 or 60 pounds. They migrate towards the sugar, or they get into gambling, they get into other types of things. The classic one I hear all the time by drug addicts a lot of times is, I'm a drug addict, not an alcoholic. I have to tell them alcohol is a drug, but they don't want to hear that. Because basically I'm looking for any way to get out of what I have to do. Because all we can do is arrest the addiction, but every time you arrest the addiction, the stuff starts coming up. We got to deal with it. So what I want to do in this series is give you the techniques and ways to deal with all this stuff. The greatest technique of all, of course, is the 12 steps. But there are other techniques and ways you can do it too, to be able to get through all this and be able to realize I got to do my work. So many of us want somebody else to do it for us. I know I doing counseling and being the clinical director at Starting Point, and people call me up and they want magic. I don't have magic. I want me to solve all their problems in 35 seconds. Well, if you want to do that, I have a magic wand. It's a lot of fun. I love to wave it over their head. Since I'm Italian, what I want to do is smack them over the head with it, but I'm not allowed to do that anymore. I'll be good, I promise you. All right, don't worry. Terry, I won't hit anybody, I promise you, don't worry. So the concept is, I have to realize more and more today that there is no magic, there's work. Unless you do your work, unless you connect with your work, and everything else just doesn't work. That's what it comes right down to. And that's why I wanted to go through the roots of addiction, the foundations of addiction, but they all go back to the first 10 years of your life. They all go back to the foundations of that. And later on in this series too, I'll give you the 7 questions again of the things you can do to actually do this own inventory of your own life and take a look at it to help you with it. We do that in the Codependency series too. That's why I get excited about this, because the addiction series led me to the Codependency series, which led me to the inner child stuff, which is all interconnected. It's all part of it. Because if I don't go back and take care of little Vinny and deal with that little kid inside of me, then everything else never would have worked. Because I carried a lot of garbage in me for a long period of time. And I got to be able now to release that garbage and let it out. I don't want to be a garbage can anymore. It's no fun being a garbage can. Oscar the Grouch, I know he likes the trash can, but I really don't like it anymore. I want to be able to get out of that can and be able to move forward with my life. It's important. And so I just want you to go over this. You have a look at the root of addiction. And as I said, I'll spend more time on isolation addiction next week, the week after that on fantasy addictions. Then the final week I'll spend on caretaker addictions. Because I really want you to understand these addictions and understand why we migrate towards them and how the recovery process really does work when you come right down to it. And then later on, down the road and on the schedule, we will deal with the codependency issues, which is the foundation of all addiction. You come right down to it. So I want to share a prayer today just to kind of put this in perspective, because I look at addiction from a different perspective today. I have a compulsive nature. My mom gave it to me, and I thank her every day for it now, because it brought me into the gift of recovery. My life has changed dramatically as a result of it. So many beautiful things have happened. So I'm grateful for that. But, you have to realize the fact that we all got our stuff, and just someday we got to look at our stuff and deal with it. And I always joke, I say, we all got stuff. Some of us have suitcases full of stuff. Some of us have, cedar trunks full of stuff. Some of us have a moving van full of stuff. It's stuff. That's all that it is. And if we work on it and deal with it, life changes for you. That's what it really comes down to. We all have our personalities. We have our traits. Isn't it wonderful? That's what it's really all about. Come right down to it. So, being Italian, you have all kinds of crazy traits. It's just unbelievable. I joke about this all the time, as you know. When I was a kid, as soon as I was born, my parents gave me a PhD in fear, guilt, and worry automatically, and it's amazing. It goes right along with the territory. And I'm sure it's not just Italians, it's other areas too. But the concept is, wow, so many things, so many connections, but you got to look at these with a positive attitude. And I'll show you how to do that as we go through this process, okay? So let us pray. God, we come before you today as people in prayer. We ask for guidance and direction. As we walk the journey of earth, walk the journey of our life, teach us not to be afraid, to look within, to look where things come from, to be able to do things with a positive attitude, with a healing attitude, to learn from them, to realize who we are as who we're supposed to be. Help us to accept ourselves. Help us to learn from our history and from our past. Help us to realize as we walk this journey that we're just human beings. We have our little things that we have inside of us. Help us to acknowledge what is, to accept what is, and to adjust life accordingly. We can't do this without your help. So please be our guide and be our strength as we walk this journey and realize the importance of not migrating towards addiction, to migrate away into recovery. We pray and we ask this, God, in your name. We ask this forever and ever. Amen. Now we're going to ask if you wouldn't mind unmuting, and we're going to make an attempt to say the Serenity Prayer, the we version of the Serenity Prayer together. Okay.
God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. God's will, not mine, be done.